there are opportunities always. Just don't close them out. And financial resources always help. So to the extent you learn some of those good habits early, and do save and do plan. I always talk about planning and saving for education. You can get there.
It's a complex world out there. It seems to take forever.
There is disappointment, which is natural.
Resilience is about hope.
Most of our ideas come from just listening.
Ask a courageous question.
It feels good to be able to do something positive for people.
You are a force multiplier.
Welcome to Watching Trees Grow, a podcast by Troutwood. I'm Gene Natale, co-founder and CEO of Troutwood. Today we have a very special guest. We're talking with Mary Morris, who is the CEO of the Virginia529 plan, the largest 529 plan in America, a plan that manages over around $100 billion on behalf of 2 million beneficiaries. And you heard both of those numbers correct. Mary, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's so good to be with you.
And I think, Mary, we probably should say a thank you to Ted Daniels and SFEPD, who was kind of to put you and I on a panel together at their annual financial leadership conference. And that's how you and I first met.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that we did.
Likewise. So we have a set of questions that we have prepared, and we're going to go through those. But I think when our audience, as you know, our audience, it's a student audience, educators, parents, when they hear a number like $100 billion, it's a very hard number to even relate to. You get to see that number daily. Whose money is that? How does your mind digest a number that large?
That is other people's money. That's how I think about it. We have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of other people's money that they are saving in $5 and $10 increments sometimes. The account owner owns the money, but they are saving for the beneficiaries, who are a lot of your listeners, those students, their loved ones that they want to prepare for a better future and to make it a little bit easier to tap into the costs of higher education. So, each individual account is important. We look at those individual accounts. I don't really think about, when you ask me the number, it's like, well, it's around $100 billion. Give or take, it changes every day. But the important part is that, a lot of people are putting in money that they have saved, the good old fashioned hard way, a little bit, hopefully every month. If you save in, just do an automatic contribution of 10, 20, 100, whatever you can put in every month, put in gifts, put in year-end bonuses, Christmas presents, whatever you can do to start leveraging it up and saving personally.
And for anyone who's hearing 529 and saying, what is it? We're going to get there. Mary, you said two things that really resonate with me. You said it's other people's money, and you followed it up by saying, families, individuals can contribute $5, $10 amounts that I'll say that's small towards their future. First, what is a fiduciary? When you say we're a fiduciary in other people's money, what do you mean?
We are stewards. We are trustees. We are caretakers of that money. It's funny when you say that. Our marketing team tells that we don't like that word because people don't understand it. And I think, but it's such an important word. Fiduciary is a position of trust, and we really take that seriously. Everyone on my team, myself, my board, that's the cornerstone to what we do. We are taking care of, safekeeping other people's money. And we really take that seriously. We want to provide the lowest fees we can, the best rates, the best products, the best investment options, and really take that seriously so that it's a good exercise and provide information along the way. And we do a lot with things like this. Financial education, understanding all of these things is a big part of our mission as well.
And a shout out to Virginia, one of the very few, but also the first states to introduce a personal finance mandate in the K through 12, correct?
Well, yes, the mandate is actually for high school students that they have to complete a 1-year course in personal finance and economics in order to graduate from a Virginia high school. So there are other elements throughout. There is an SOL, Standards of Learning, for students beginning in kindergarten. And we work with the Virginia Council of Economic Educators and some other things to provide lessons to kindergartners. We have a program called Reading Makes Sense, and they are books. They are Caldecott winners and Newbery Award winners. We provide those to the school libraries with curriculum and other suggested readings, and the school librarians produce, to sort of talk about that. They're all great books. They all have some financial component and age appropriate. So the SOLs in kindergarten through the 3rd grade, 4th grade are all about wants versus needs and resources and limited resources. And then there are building blocks on that, obviously. So so we start just as early as kindergartners.
Well, I love because as I learn every time I have one of these conversations, and you taught me as we were talking before the show that VA529 played a role in helping Virginia take that step. And I thought that was really exciting to hear.
We did. We were supporters of it. We have some resources. We are entirely non-general fund funded. That means we don't get any state tax dollars at all. We do assess a small administrative fee on our savings programs, and we use that to fund our operations and also to work on a lot of our financial education objectives. And we also work to provide scholarship programs and other types of resources for underrepresented and under-resourced citizens of Virginia. And so that's one of those programs that we were able to provide some financial support to the Department of Education in Virginia as they developed the personal finance and economics curriculum, an online curriculum that's made available to every teacher in Virginia for free, and which is also presented as a virtual Virginia course online for students who want to take it that way. They can take it in the summer, they can take it during the school year, they can take it in school, they can take it out of school, as long as they get the curriculum. And so we helped, and then we also helped them develop the module on saving for higher education and using a 529 account.
I love hearing that. The reason I brought that up, I have observed across 3 different audiences a general, I'll say a strong desire to learn more about a 529. And when you're doing work like that behind the scenes, that just shows even the added value. But those 3 audiences, students, parents, and educators, who I imagine are your audience.
Absolutely.
As well.
Oh, absolutely. We love to work with educators. And, again, there's always a leveraging effect in learning about 529s. I know, we know that even though we do a lot in Virginia, and we have pretty high recognition in Virginia, better than most of the national numbers in terms of what Virginia 529 is, what a 529 program is. We were one of the first in the country that started using Virginia 529, or Invest 529 is what we use more broadly nationally, along with College America, which is an advisor program. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself in our conversation, but I thought it was really important to use the term 529 because that's what the national media uses. And that's where 529 comes from. And so and more states have adopted that. Now you'll see it's Pennsylvania 529 now. It's Maryland 529, Virginia 529. Utah has switched to, they call their program My 529. So that starts getting into people's heads. I've always said I wanted 529 to be for college savings, what a 401k is to people on retirement. You may not know everything about it, but at least it has something to do with saving for higher education, post-secondary education.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to compare to your 401k analogy, my wife and I, we have 529 plans for our 4 kids. If we put that money in the 529 plan, Mary, can you give our audience a feel for the depth that's behind you? Like
Sure.
when you say $100 billion, 2 million beneficiaries, and here we see you in your office, I'm guessing you're not doing it alone.
No. Well, let me give you the quick and dirty on 529 plans. How about that? 529 plan, they all have to be state sponsored. So that's kind of a key component. Virginia 529, my agency, it's a state agency. We're an independent agency of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we have that, state behind us. I think we have the best of both worlds. We have that public sector mission-based foundation. So when I talk about a fiduciary responsibility, it just really means something. But we're also allowed to be a little bit entrepreneurial, and we're a little bit competitive. So we provide our products, and individuals can choose among 529 programs across the country. We're only that big because we have a national program, and we have multiple programs. But the underlying thing of it is 529. That's a reference to the Internal Revenue Code that gives us our special tax advantages. So why would a family save for college in a 529 versus a savings account, individual stocks and bonds, whatever they may do for all their other savings? It's those tax advantages. If you save in a 529, it grows tax-free, federal and state tax-free for as long as you have it invested. And here's the real kicker. It is never taxed as long as you use it for what are called qualified higher education expenses. And that definition has broadened in recent years. So as long as you use it for intended purposes, you never pay tax on your gains. That can be a huge, again, that word leverage, that you can really increase your savings by not having to pay tax on it year over year or when it's paid out. And then in addition, 37, soon perhaps to be 38 states provide a state income tax deduction for your contributions. So you put money in with after-tax dollars. So it's a little bit different from most 401ks in that it's not pre-tax dollars, but you get a tax deduction when it comes time to file your state tax returns. So a lot of folks that are doing that now in Virginia and across the country get to take a deduction for their contributions. In Virginia, it's up to $4,000 per account per year, unlimited carry forward. So if you put more than $4,000 in, you get to take that deduction over the next however many years it takes against your state income tax liabilities. So those two things alone are a really big benefit. In Virginia, for someone who's paying at the top tax bracket and puts a full $4,000 in, it's probably about $250 a year they can reduce their taxes by to do something that they should be doing anyway that's good for them. And oh yeah, it's growing tax-free. So a lot of good benefits there.
Because the other side of just saving some of the tax dollars is the growth that you just said. Your
Right.
money is multiplying.
Right. And the more money you've saved in advance, the less you have to take out in loans. I would never tell anybody loans are an absolute no-no. Loan debt can be fine if it's managed well, if you know what you're doing. But the more money you've saved, the less debt you'll need. And I guarantee you that, that it's that difference, what it takes to save to pay out, let's say, $10,000 in tuition costs or expenses is roughly half of what it will take you to pay that through a loan and then pay it off over time. And none of that money inures to your benefit. So it's just a much better deal to what's that old saying, pay me now or pay me later? Pay yourself now by saving, and you'll pay out less later, and you'll have more disposable income when you get out of college or when you finish with your education to get started on buying a house, establishing a business, doing all those other things that you may want to do.
I'm gonna just reemphasize your statement there. The more money you save, the less debt you'll need. That's a power statement, Mary. I do a lot of one-on-one sessions with college students, and to our parent and educator audience, the fear is real, and the fear is not a set dollar amount. It's just this bubble called debt.
Right.
And so I think that's a very powerful statement. And I'll add on, parents, the earlier you start, the more time your money has to grow.
Yeah. Well, that's one of those things, I always tell people, so just get started. Don't worry about how much it's going to cost in the future. Don't worry about where your kid's going to go. Don't worry about where you're going to go. Because again, one thing to remember, anyone can have a 529 account. It is not just for small children. It is not just for high school students. Anyone can have a 529 account, and anyone might need it. We're seeing a lot of people after the pandemic saying, I want to do something different. I don't want to have to, work out in the general public. I want to work in an office so that when people have to get sent home, I get to work from home, or I want to work in healthcare, whatever it is. They need to upskill, they need to reskill, they need to continually learn, and you can use your 529 account for that. When I mentioned, we have expanded that. So an apprenticeship, the costs associated with an apprenticeship, you can use your 529 account for. Many types of credentialing programs, certificate programs, and we're trying to expand that even further. You can use your 529 account. Parents with more funds at their disposal. And again, we saw this during the pandemic when some parents wanted their children to continue to have an in-person experience. They actually put them into private schools. You can use your 529 account up to $10,000 a year for private school tuition. That's not my favorite because you're not using it for as long and you don't have the ability to let it grow, and you want to have it in the future. But we did see families tap into it to whatever amount they needed in a short term. Hopefully they can backfill it. And then finally, you can actually use a 529 account now, this is pretty recent, to pay down some student debt. We think that's important because some families, you may not know how much you've saved, you may not know how much you need. So you might take on the debt as, a little bit of debt, use your 529, use current resources and current income to the extent you need to. If when you finish with your education, you've got some money left over in your 529 account, you can use it to pay down that debt faster and get it off the books. So again, it's just we just become more flexible over time, and we continue as an industry to work on that. It's one of the things I neglected to mention when I was talking about 529 programs. Every state in the country, with the exception of Wyoming, and they work with Colorado on their program, so they work together, has a 529 program. The way Section 529 of the Internal Revenue Code goes, a program has to be sponsored by the state. Part of that's because the state started these programs in the first place back in the early 80s with what are called prepaid programs. Probably won't get into that. That's a little bit in the weeds, and most states don't have them. Pennsylvania, however, does have a really good one where you're located, and Virginia has one. And so I know a lot about them, but it's more akin to a defined benefit plan in the retirement world. We take out the market risk and, sort of give a promise of what will pay out in the future versus what most 529s do, which are savings programs. You invest in a mutual fund most often, very different types of portfolios. Most have target date funds, target enrollment funds, which start less conservatively and get more conservative as the students approach college age. And I'm probably getting into more in the weeds on this.
I like where you're taking that, Mary, and I want to go there, but I'm like, my brain's like still back.
All things, I know, too much information.
But it was great information, and I don't want people to miss two things you said. One, I hadn't heard before, and you said it's relatively new. When you said I can use a piece of my 529 to pay off student loan debt, two thoughts popped in my head. One, if I'm talking about me, the individual, the student, why didn't I use the 529 money already while I was in school? And my second question to follow onto that is, or can parents or, whoever set up the 529 plan use that to help students? And if I misinterpret, I want to make sure. I wanted to ask that question.
So yes, they absolutely can. The reason why you might not have, one, most people aren't fortunate enough to have saved everything they need in their 529. Right. And you can use a 529 account for tuition, for fees, for books, for room and board, if you're attending at least half time, which is 6 credit hours a semester. So there are different things that you can use it for. And so, I know a lot of parents are like, I'm going to use some of my 529, but I want to spread it out over 4 years. I don't want to use it all in the first year. Or sometimes students get scholarships in the first year that don't persist into the second, third, and fourth year. So, it's a complicated calculus to figure out what you're going to need to make it through whatever educational course you've chosen. And so, that wise use of debt and resources comes into play. Some parents think it's really important that their children have some what they call skin in the game and take on some debt. So they may be willing to support with their 529 fund or whatever they have, but they want the student to learn a little bit about debt, and it's a pretty good way to learn. It's easy to tap into. You can start establishing it. You don't start, generally speaking, and again, we'll go more into the weeds. I could probably talk to you for the next year. We could do a bunch of sessions, but you don't start accruing interest on that student debt while you're a student. So it's not bad to take on that debt. It's a way to manage how all your money is flowing. If you can then pay it off quickly, you're not paying people back interest. So you can limit the amount of interest that you're paying. So it's really just a budgeting concept, really. If you're not quite sure what all you're going to need over the course of a 1 year, 2 year, 4 year educational timeline. The other thing is that, families got so much saved. They've got 3 kids, let's say. One ends up getting scholarships. They're the superstar. They either have an athletic scholarship, whatever. They don't need their 529 as much. The other one isn't ready for college. You want to hold on to something for them because they may change their minds. You just never know what they're going to need. They may do a certificate program. They may go to a community college and get an associate's degree, but right now they didn't need it. And your third student, you didn't have enough saved for everybody, so they've got debt. They graduate, but they've got some debt. So you can choose to use those other accounts that you didn't need. You can move the money and help that other beneficiary. So that's another flexibility of 529 programs, is that you can change the beneficiary. You can change it within your broad family group. So you can take it for yourself as a parent. Grandparents can have accounts for their grandchildren. They can change the beneficiary among the grandchildren. You can change it to an aunt, an uncle, cousins, anywhere within the family tree. You can do it without adverse tax consequences. And so again, a family that's budgeting and planning for multiple children has some flexibility in how they ultimately use those funds.
I love that 1, 2, 3 example that you just gave. The others, so in a past life, Mary, I was an emergency medical technician, an EMT. Now, paramedic is the certification. You said I can use a 529 for apprenticeships and certifications, which I know firsthand from talking with both parents and students. They don't necessarily know this. When most people, when they think 529, the brain immediately connects to college.
Yep.
What are the boundaries around the certificates, the apprenticeships? And I love that you use community college in another example too, because you just opened minds, but specific to the certificates and apprenticeships.
That is a lot of what I talk about these days, because I think it is so important. Families, I think, get obsessed with, college is too expensive and the tuition inflation, it's so high. But again, they're always thinking about a 4-year university program. We try to help families think about how they can plan and save as much as you can, but also how do you just make it affordable? How is it more accessible and affordable? That's our mission at Virginia529. That's what's in our statute. You do that by thinking about, well, what else can you do? If you start at community college, you are probably saving between 1/3 and 1/2 of the total expense of a 4-year degree just by getting your first 2 years at community college. So you sort of save your 529 money. Maybe you can afford community college without any debt, or your 529. Again, depending on the household income, if you're Pell Grant eligible, in most states, the Pell Grant will cover all of your tuition and fees at community college. You still have to live, and so maybe you have to work, maybe you don't. And that's what a lot of families find, I think, that with the 529 account, between what they can cover on their own, what they can cover with the 529, and what they may cover with a small amount of debt, a reasonable amount of debt that you have a chance to pay it back in a reasonable amount of time after you graduate. That's how I look at taking on student debt. Don't take on 6-figure debt if you're going to go into a line of work that's not going to afford you an income that will let you pay it off. But again, that's a different topic, probably for a different day. But you sort of think through all of that and get started. So if you start at community college, maybe you live at home, maybe you don't, but you can save a lot of money if you do that. You don't have the travel expenses, you don't have a lot of these other expenses, and just the cost of the coursework is much less. Same thing with certificate programs. Apprenticeships, often there aren't hard costs with it. In fact, usually in an apprenticeship program, you're being paid some kind of a salary, usually less than what you'll make when you finish with the apprenticeship. But depending on the program and the state, there may be some expenses. You still have to take some classes probably at a community college. Sometimes the program pays for that. Sometimes the individual has to. And generally all of your tools, your supplies. So in a more traditional apprenticeship, let's say a welding program, the tools of that the student would have to supply. That can be thousands of dollars. You can use your 529 for that. So, it's just a wide
Mary,
range.
Can I ask that you repeat that? Because that's the first I've ever heard that. And if that's the first I've ever heard it, I'm guessing it's the first of many educators, students, and parents have it. That what you just said on welding and equipment. Will you say that one more time?
Yeah. So with an apprenticeship program, again, like a lot of times people think, oh, they're paying me, and they are, but it may not be a living wage. I don't, depending how you characterize that, it's a lower wage in an apprenticeship program because you're learning. And so there may be some coursework associated, and sometimes you have to pay for that. Sometimes the program pays for that. It just depends on how well funded that apprenticeship program is. But almost always the tools that you need in the apprenticeship program are required to be provided by the student, by the apprentice. And so in a welding program, whatever, welding tools and boots and equipment that you have to have is an expense to the student. The program doesn't provide those. Some of the more modern, if you would, there are a lot of medical technical types of apprenticeships now. So it's not not your grandfather's or your father's apprenticeship program. Those are still hugely important. HVAC work and welding and all of the sort of trades are hugely important. In Virginia, apprenticeships are a very big thing because we have the Newport News shipbuilding company is in Newport News, Virginia. It's huge. They build massive ships for the U.S. military, and they have an unbelievable apprenticeship program. And I think they might even cover all of your supplies. I mean, they are pretty much of a soup to nuts apprenticeship program. But again, not all apprenticeship programs are built alike. So some of them, there are expenses. But to me, it's important to talk about it because, again, I think some families, with fewer resources think, well, 529 is not for me, because I can't save tens of thousands of dollars over any period of time. That's just not realistic. And that may be true. You may be able to get more than you think if you start asking friends and family to help you by putting gifts into your 529. But when you can use it for things like that, that can be the difference between going into that apprenticeship program and not. If you have living expenses that are more than that apprenticeship program is going to pay you, remember, you can use your 529 for room and board. So if you save for a number of years to be able to then transition and go, okay, I'm going to take that plunge now. I'm going to take off the 6 months that I need to study full time to get my EMT certificate. I can live off of the money I've been able to save in my 529, or I can at least supplement, right? So I don't have to work 2 part-time jobs. I can just work 1 part-time job while I'm getting the training. Those are the types of things people need to think about. What's realistic for you? What can you do, and how might you use that to follow your dreams, to follow your goals, to find a better career path forward for you?
Wow. Mary, you've obviously done this before because this is so in sync and so broad. A high school, the example you just gave of a parent thinking of their own individual child who may choose college, may not. Well, a high school educator in the classroom, that's not necessarily her or his choice to make, but they have 30 students each with individual dreams, some subset that want to go to college, some subset that want to pursue certifications, apprenticeships, and some subset that just doesn't know. And the way that you have kind of expressed this, it's available to all of those students.
Absolutely. One of the last things I did, I guess, before the pandemic hit and doing things in person stopped was we work, again, it's one of our big volunteer efforts, along with using some of our resources to support junior achievement. So hopefully some of your students have been junior achievement scholars, and Finance Park is one of my absolute favorites. And in the Richmond area, we support the Finance Park Career Center. And I just love it. We help pay for that. And we have lots of really great technology, big screen monitors with information. We tap into the Virginia Wizard, which gives you ideas. There's a board. And the last time I did this, I was standing with a young man, a junior, I think, in high school. And you were looking in the little bubbles about jobs and how much education it takes and what you can do. And it gave you a real feel for the simplest example for me always is dealing with animals. You like to work with animals. Okay. If you want to be a vet, you have to go 4 years of college and vet school. And there's going to be a cost to that. But it also tells you, what you might make when you get out. There's a vet tech. That's a different level of training and experience. You might be a groomer. That's a certificate probably, right? Or some shorter course. You can be a dog walker. I mean, there are all kinds of things you can do, and they all require different levels of education, and they're going to have a very different level of compensation. So you decide what works for you and what's of interest. So I was talking to this one young man, and he absolutely knew. He said, I want to be a heating and air conditioning mechanic. I want to install heating and air conditioning units in homes. It was so specific. He had a friend whose father had his own heating and air conditioning business, and he thought that looked pretty cool, and he didn't want to be in the classroom anymore, and he liked, the idea of moving around and just being in different places and not being stuck in an office. And so we talked about it, and it was such a great conversation because we looked and he could see, and he wasn't too impressed with what he could make just being a technician. I said, well, but there are other things you can do. You might decide in a couple of years that you want to get another certificate. You might decide you want to have your own business, because then you can kind of control what you do and how much money you make and have other people work for you. So you might go back to the community college and take some business classes so you know what to do and how to start a business. And or you really might change your mind and decide, I really want to learn this. I want to be an engineer. I want to go to school. I want to go to college, and I want to run this whole program and do installations in office buildings in Richmond, Virginia. All those things are open to you. But start. Get that initial training and be an HVAC tech or mechanic, and then just don't close out other opportunities. And if you have a 529 account that you just keep putting those $10 a month in, or $50 or whatever you can, and your parents help you, then those opportunities are open to you. And you know what? If he just does great and he likes what he's doing, but he ends up having kids, then take that 529 account and transfer the beneficiary to your kids and start saving for them. So, all things are possible. Just think about opportunities, and don't assume that you know the answers or what path you're going to take. And it generally works out.
Oh, Mary, that's worth a round of applause. Because when you were saying that, in my mind, I was putting myself in a high school classroom. And I was saying, Gene, I can be anything. That's what your example, high school students, you can be anything. Don't feel that societal pressure to give off the impression that you do know the next steps.
Right. And you don't have to know now. I tell kids all the time, it's like, you just don't need to know what you want to be when you grow up. I changed careers different times. I'm a lawyer by training. I was very fortunate. I had all the opportunities to get education. My parents were able to, I don't even know. I didn't worry about it. Honestly, I was just so fortunate. And I try to tap into that privilege and recognize that not everyone's that lucky. And my parents didn't even think about it that much. I just was also self-motivated to want to get an education, and they were supportive. Now, I covered my law school education, so I learned a little bit then, but it was so much less expensive, back a million years ago when I went to law school. But I started off working for a law firm. I transitioned. I worked for the Attorney General's office in Virginia for a while. I went into the public sector. I've been in and out. No one said, now they were all kind of law related, but I haven't practiced law for more than half of my career. So, no matter what you've done, you can go in different directions. And so you don't have to know. And I have, 2 kids, and they're still figuring it out, and it's fine to be figuring it out as you go along. That's the way life goes. It's not a straight line. It can be a curvy road, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't want to speak for you, Mary, but I'm comfortable saying that I'm still figuring it out.
I used to say that I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and I said that into my early 50s. I'm actually there. I'm so happy where I am. I get the chance to talk about things like this that I really am passionate about, and I get to work with high school students. And like I said, we work with a different group with JA. We go into elementary schools, and I had one experience there with a little fella in first grade, and he was so cute. And it was a challenged school in Virginia, and they had to draw what they wanted to be, and he was drawing it really tiny. And I went over and talked to him, and he was like embarrassed by it. And when I figured it out, it was a videographer. He wanted to be a videographer. So it's stupid. And I knew in that second someone had told him, family member, friend, something, that was a stupid thing to aspire to. You don't want to do that. And for me, it's like, and I said, no, it's not. I think that sounds awesome. You could do all kinds of things with that, and you have talent, and you're artistic, and so you can start that encouragement at any time. And not all kids get it at home. That. You see it. So that's where educators come in. That's where mentors come in. That's where our volunteers that can come out and talk to kids come in. kids get lessons in many different ways and at different times, but the message always has to be, to aspire. And I'm not even sure I say you can be anything, who knows what but there are opportunities always. Just don't close them out. And financial resources always help. So to the extent you learn some of those good habits early, and do save and do plan. I always talk about planning and saving for education. You can get there because there are different paths and there are people who will help you along the way. You just have to learn how to tap into some of those resources.
I hope that first grader kind of erased the small videographer picture and drew a really big one after you.
It was so cute. And it just broke my heart that he said that, because it's like, oh, I want to just strangle whoever told you that was a stupid goal. Because it's not one, it isn't. And, why would you tell that to a 6-year-old? It just, anyway.
Yeah, no. I'll brag about something that my daughter and some of her friends in their 5th grade class have done, Mary. Maybe some of our listeners find inspiration. They started a self-esteem team at the school, and it's an anonymous envelope where you can, if you saw a kid maybe be told he couldn't be a videographer, you could put it in there and say, hey, Billy needs a pep talk because he's really good with a video camera and he was told he's not.
Oh,
and they get just an anonymous little pep talk. The generations coming behind us are, I think, going to really surprise us with what they're capable of.
I love that. I hope that children are, in fact, growing up to be more empathetic and more kind than they have been maybe in past generations.
Well, Mary, you kind of have brought us full circle here, and you said a word that's really core to what we do at Trotwood. You said planning. I'm torn here. Because we could go 2 tangents. We could go down the rabbit hole of the planning behind the $100 billion VA529, which is a gigantic architecture and a lot we can learn. I think for purposes of this conversation, let's table that for another conversation. If I'm an individual, if I'm a parent, if I'm a teacher hearing this, I've heard 3 things in this conversation. I've heard there's, and specific to a 529, there are tax benefits, my money can grow, and it reduces the cost of my or my loved one's educational expenses. How do I get started? How do I build a plan to go do it?
Spot on. So the first thing you do is, do your research. I always say, look to your state's plan first, because you may have those tax benefits and things that make you want to be in your state's program. But look at their offerings, look at their fees, see what you get from that program. As I said, we have folks from all over the country in our programs, but most people stick with their state's plan. And then you can go to the website. And honestly, if you just type in Virginia529, that's what we use. But in any state, that will get you to your state's program. So, do a little bit of education is always great. Those state websites will tell you about the programs, what you can do. There are also 2 good resources, I think, if you just want to learn broad information and do some comparisons. Savingforcollege.com is one website, and then collegesavings.org, which is the College Savings Plans Network, of which we are a member. All the states are. That gives you a lot of information about 529 programs and lets you compare different states' programs, the fees, the offerings, and all of that. And then opening up an account really takes about 10 minutes. Doesn't matter which state's program you're in, I don't think. Only takes a few pieces of information. And in Virginia, you can open up an account with $10. So just getting started is the key. Most people are terrible procrastinators. That is probably my biggest failing in life. It's if you can put it off until tomorrow, well, then put it off until tomorrow. Well, no, just stop putting it off. A lot of states will do promotions. So look for that. We'll put $50 into your account if you open up an account and set it for recurring contributions, or they have prizes, they have different things. So tap into that. Maybe you get some free money put into your account, but just get started. It doesn't take very long. Make your selections. You can always make changes. And then one of the things we offer within our program is, you don't even have to have an account, but if you just sign in, sort of get your credentials to get started, we offer some tools, some planning tools. We have some calculators that you can tap into just to get an idea of how your account might grow, what the difference would be between saving or paying with debt for college education. How much do you want to save? What do you think is realistic? So we have some good planning tools. But then we have something powered by a group called Invite Education that lets you set a plan for infants through into college, and it taps into, you can put in that site, you can put all the personal information, you can put financial information, and it steps you through the things that you should be thinking about. So we're trying to provide those tools. And then the other thing, again, I don't look at other websites, but if you just go into Virginia529's, you can subscribe to our newsletter, and every 4 to 6 weeks we send out things. So if there are any, specials or contests that we're running, you find out about that. But we also include some lessons, information. When you talked about fiduciary, we've started trying to do some things where we explain some of the terminology, where we talk about our different portfolios. So you can just learn a lot just from starting to go to some of those websites and read a little bit. And then if you open up an account, again, it's not a huge investment of time or money just to get started. And then hopefully you'll continue and you'll start to get messages from us or whatever program you tap into. We're not going to harass you. We're not going to shame anybody. We're just trying to give you some information to help you along the way and to encourage you to continue saving. One of the things that we're really proud of in Virginia is the percentage of our customers or accounts that receive contributions every year. And that's actually one of our performance measures to increase that number. So we don't forget about you once you open an account. We want you to persist and continue to grow. And almost 70% of our accounts have people, have contributions at least once a year.
Wow.
So I think the national average is somewhere in the 40s. So we really do focus on that in Virginia. We think that it's, that's important. It's good to just get started and open up the account, but too many people do that and then they forget about it. Again, inertia takes over. So again, the biggest thing I would say for a family is to open an account and set it up for a recurring contribution of any amount of money, just something, so that you're putting money in every month. And then you think about it and, you don't feel it. If you set it up for, again, $10, $50, whatever your budget allows, and then increase it when you can. So, and that's just basic financial stuff that I know you're telling your students all the time. If you get, a bonus, put some of that into this account. If you get an increase in salary or compensation, take a piece of that and increase your monthly contribution. That's how you build it over time. Start small and let it grow with you as you grow.
Yeah. Don't underestimate the impact of a lot of littles. It's the steady $5 and $10 amounts that you referenced.
That's where 100 billion came from. I mean, maybe that's one good way to put it. We have grown it account by account. It's interesting. Virginia has in both of our programs, and I haven't really talked about it, College America is what we call an advisor program. So if you work with a financial advisor, you are likely to be in our College America program. It has some additional fees, and some people don't like those, and you don't have to pay them. But if you aren't really comfortable with this and you have a more complex financial picture, then you probably work with a financial advisor and they will probably put you into a College America program. Still one of the most highly regarded in the country and with very low asset management based fees. So, we think it's a great product. Our Invest 529 is our what we call direct sold savings program. So that's more for the do-it-yourselfers. You go onto our website, you select your portfolios. We try to give you some education around it, but you can get started that way. And then for Virginians, we have what we call, it's our tuition track portfolio now, but it's defined benefit option. So we charge you average tuition at a Virginia Public University per unit. And when it gets paid out in the future, we pay out at average tuition. It's very similar to Pennsylvania's program. So those are your different options. But again, you just get started, just put a little bit in every month, and it really makes a difference. And we've done that over the last 25 plus years. We started with 0 accounts 25 years ago, and through our educational work, we've helped people to grow those initial small balances. And so both of our programs, I think the average right now account balance is about $23,000, $24,000 in an account. that includes those that are just starting and those that are already paying down. And we absolutely see that it works because I have the charts. We get all of our data, and you can see they start at maybe an average account opening balance. It averages out at about 3,000 because some people can put in a lot. Some people are putting in 10. You end up with a start of about 3,000. And then it grows slowly up to about age 18, and then it starts to pay out exactly what it's supposed to do. So the folks that get started in a 529, have done that pre-work, I think. So they know what they need to do. They just, and this vehicle helps them do that steady, slow and steady, delayed gratification of having a goal and working towards it over, a fairly long period of time. And if you do that, if you stick with it, it pays off.
Mary, I have a final question, and that's one I view as kind of fun. Imagine that you and I are high school educators, where it's lunch break, and where we just listened to this podcast, listening to Mary Morris, the CEO of Virginia529, talk about 529s in a way that we understood and inspired us. And I'm curious, if you were that high school educator and you had a blank canvas in front of you, what assignment would you create for your students? And something that would allow these students to take action based on listening to yours and my conversation right now.
Well, I could take that in a couple of different ways. I would have them do some research. I would send them out to the internet to start learning about 529 programs. And I'm not sure which one I would pick. I'd probably have to take a look myself first and see what the current messages are, but or make them find 5 differences among 5 different programs, right? Or compare and contrast the different types of programs. Because I'd be looking for, is that program going to help you with your goal setting? Is it going to provide some financial education with you? Is it going to be on this journey with you or not? Because that's important to me. But you could have them compare the fees for a 529 program if you want. It depends on what your lesson is, right? But just the broader one is to just think about, or to prepare a little white paper for your parents to start talking about these sometimes uncomfortable topics. Families tend to not talk about finances. So a student needs to know their family, but if they can broach it and say, hey, we learned about these 529 programs. Do you know about them? Do you have a 529 account for me? And if not, let's work on it together. And, so it could go in different directions, but I would make it interactive, and I would have it be learning about 529s and then sharing that with your family. In a way that works. Again, I'll go back to my JA example with Finance Park. That is an opportunity for students to build a budget, and they take on personas and have to figure out how to pay for everything in life. And every time I do that, they leave with an appreciation for their parents and how hard it is for them to do what they're doing every day, which is keep their household together and pay the bills and, get their kids to soccer practices and all of that. So this could be the same kind of thing on a very targeted way to help them understand what their parents may be struggling with, and to maybe give them some conversational points to start that conversation with their families to maybe get someone to take some action to work towards their future.
Mary, thank you. Thank you on behalf of the Troutwood community. Thank you personally. And thank you also thank you to you and your entire team on behalf of those 2 million beneficiaries for the work that you do. It was an honor having you on the podcast.
Well, thanks so much. We have a great team. I have so much support, and it's so much fun. And we are all, that's the nice thing about having the state involved, and the state part of it is mission driven. I mean, we are laser focused on, we're not making money. This is not a for-profit. We're a state agency just trying to help families have a better future. So thank you.
I believe it, Mary. Your passion shone through in every statement. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Watching Trees Grow, a podcast by Troutwood.